that the two opposite states of mind that both facilitate creativity and productivity look something like this. And you can tell me whether or not this maps to anything that you know. One is, just as you described, our body is in motion, could be running, walking, might even be in the shower or something of that sort, but we aren't trying to direct our mind toward a specific linear trajectory or outcome. It's not like working out an equation or a theorem the same way we would if we were at a piece of paper or writing out a sentence, a structured paragraph. So it's body in motion, mind not channeled toward one specific target. The opposite extreme to me is body still, mind very active, which resembles rapid eye movement, sleep when we learn a lot and neural rewiring occurs, and dreaming, but for which there's also a lot of examples of very accomplished creatives using that sort of thing, of meditative-like approaches, forcing oneself to be still and thinking. So it sounds like you incorporate both, and I'm curious, as a computer scientist who writes code, does theorems, does a lot of math, where you can't just kind of wing it. There's a right and wrong answer involved. What is your mode for sitting down and working through something that's linear and hard?
Yeah, it's interesting the way you talk about it, right? Because when I'm walking, and this is actually something you can train, and I talked about this in one of my books once, that you can actually train yourself to maintain your internal eye of focus more stably while you're walking, right? So I call this productive meditation in deep work, actually. And I practiced this in grad school, right? Okay, so I'm going to work on a particular problem while I walk, and then you actually practice bringing your attention back to the central problem. And I don't know exactly what's happening, but you get a little bit more facility working with your working memory, a little bit more efficiency with bringing stuff in and out of the working memory. And so I trained myself that I could actually write a couple paragraphs in my head, maybe not word for word, but basically word for word, like figure out how I'm going to do it, or figure out enough steps of a math proof to capture like a key insight. Like, okay, I know I'm going to get around this. Then you have to sit down and actually formally capture that. And yeah, for me, that's still working with notebook. So when I was coming up in grad school, and I was just excavating these thoughts recently, we were talking before we recorded that, I just wrote this essay about what I learned as a grad student that impacted all my writing. As a grad student in the theory group at MIT, which was just purified concentration. This is where all the deep work ideas come from, right? I mean, it was just world-class concentrators. There, the method was very still, more than one person, whiteboard. So if you have 2 or 3 people staring at the same whiteboard, you're actually going to up the level of concentration you achieve, because if you let your attention wander, you disengage that attention, there's a social capital cost. Because now I've fallen out of the whiteboard effect discussion, that's going to be a problem. So you actually maintain your focus at a higher level. And then when someone else is making their move, okay, what about this? And they're working math. It's all math on the board. You're giving that the highest attention you're capable of because you want to keep up, right? You don't want to fall behind. So it was like this hack that was figured out in the theory group that if you put 2 or 3 people at the same whiteboard to try to alchemize these insights into actual mathematically precise proofs, you get a 20-30% boost in your concentration level. And that could make all the difference, right? If you're working on a very hard proof, 20-30% boost could be the difference between solving it or not.
In one of these situations where you're at the whiteboard or chalkboard and there are 2 other individuals facing it, are they interrupting you, or is the etiquette in that scenario to just let the person go until their natural inclination to raise a hand and scream help?
Whoever has the marker on the board, they're the ones talking. So you go, okay, what about this? And now you're writing down equations or drawing your diagram, and everyone is just watching. And then when they're done, everyone steps back and looks at it. Then you can step forward. Okay, but what if we did this? And you still work on it. So when I got built some offices or worked out some offices near my house, like one of the first things we put in there was a whiteboard so they could have computer science collaborators come, because we can't work on theory otherwise. Like, it is the thing we need is a whiteboard, right? When I started grad school, they had just built this new $300 million Frank Gehry designed building for the computer science, artificial intelligence laboratory, and the linguistics. But half of it was computer science.
I know those buildings because the Peak Hour and the McGovern Neuroscience Center, and those buildings are very interesting. People should check them out if they're ever in Cambridge.
Yeah, the
Kendall Square stop.
The Status Center. Yeah, right down the street from the Kendall Square stop. Yeah. So the 6th floor was where the theoreticians were. This is where I was. So I they opened that building the year I started the doctoral program. And what did they want to show me when they brought me to this $300 million building? Look at our whiteboards. That's what they were proud of. They had filled the common space on the 6th floor, the theory floor, with these freestanding double-sided whiteboards. It was like a maze of whiteboards. And this is what everyone was so excited about was, look at our whiteboard coverage, surrounded by a $300 million building. I was trying to explain this to someone recently. Having good whiteboards to us is like an astronomer saying, look, we got this great radio telescope. Like, this is going to allow us to get data to work on that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. I think to a theoretician, that's why you see a whiteboard. whiteboard because, if you want to think at the very highest level, you need 2 or 3 people staring at the same thing, taking turns with the marker, pushing each other past where they're comfortable.
I love this because I often think about visual maps that represent our internal memory stores and plans, et cetera, for productivity. I've always relied heavily on the whiteboard. I'm getting one for home. I have one here in the podcast studio. All of my podcast notes for my solo episodes are distilled down to 4 8.5 by 11 notes, which are photographs of the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And I don't use a teleprompter. I've been accused of using one before. I don't even know how that would work. But it's extremely useful to use the whiteboard. And I think because ideas are so easily put up there and removed, there's something about writing on things that are vertical as opposed to on a flat surface. Because that's actually the way our visual perception casts things. We don't cast visual perception onto the ground where we experience the visual world mostly in front of us. I think the cognitive map and the visual map are inextricably linked, at least for sighted folks. So I think there's really something there. So in the absence of colleagues to sit there and boost our attention by 25 to 30%, what could one do? You said you have a whiteboard at home. I certainly use the whiteboard.